so much to our panel. So it was fantastic. I love the Canadian representation. That's awesome. So now we have our last panel before we break. There's going to be food and open bar in the back, but we have one more panel left. I'd like to introduce Valerie Aizpuru, our resident brilliant investment banker. She hails from Mexico City and is a huge part of the Venture Club. Valerie.
Thank you very much, Taylor. Now we're presenting our Latin American panel. Please can you come? Santiago, Fred, very nice to meet you. Emilio. I'm going to be sitting here. Is there? Okay, well, we're very excited being here in the Latin American panel, and we're going to be talking about the challenges and opportunities of this driven market. And I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you for coming. I will make a quick introduction of each one of you. We have Emilio, which is co-founder of Gondolos in Latin America, and he has a strong background in consulting for startups. Then we have Humberto. He is co-founder of Pinstat, which is a web creating for connecting people and for students and for buying and selling products. Then we have Santiago Zavala from 500 Startups. They are right now a fund that is very active in the Mexican market. They have founded more than 21 startups last year, and they are developing right now the new ecosystem for startups, which is great for the country. And they are running accelerator programs. And
I'll talk more about it.
Okay, thank you. And we have also Fred Aslan, VP from Berenberg. So they're specialized mainly in giving funding for early stages or startups from different countries, especially healthcare and technology. Paul, can you introduce? Thank you very much.
Well, I'm Paul Altran. Thanks. I'm also a co-founder of Gondolos as a social messaging application, and I work in Silicon Valley for Tango.me as the visual designer leader in the company.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for coming. Well, now we're representing two of the boom economies right now in Latin America, which is Brazil and Mexico. And we want these really high experts to tell us more about it. So Santiago, if you could start telling us, now that you're in the day-to-day of the startup business, how do you see the main opportunities for these entrepreneurs that want to go global and want to go to this region?
Well, I mean, I can speak more specifically about Mexico than the rest of the region. But what we see is a community that is generating $1.16 trillion a year on the internal production, and is growing 4% every year. That's been with a very good numbers on every indication that you see. And suddenly you start to have e-commerce, you start to have transactions happening every day. So right now there's 12 million Mexicans paying online, but that's growing more or less like 2,500 every day. So we see a great opportunity right now where you're starting to have smartphones penetrate almost the whole population. You start to have transactions happening online, and you start to have delivery working really well. So when you get those three things together, you get a great economy that is booming. The other thing that we see that is really interesting is that almost any city that has over 400,000 on population has an entrepreneur community. So we see events like Startup Weekend, we see hackathons, we see all the things that you see in the Valley suddenly spawning in all of these cities. So when you get the economy and the entrepreneurship community, certainly the only other thing that we see missing is access to capital, plus education, and maybe role models. So that's exactly what we've been working for the last 2 years. Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, and we see the same thing happening in the rest of Latin America, or at least in Spanish-speaking Latin America. Brazil might have already lived a little bit of this scenario that I was talking about, so they are a little bit further. So that's exactly what we're seeing. I would love to hear a little bit more of what the other people in the panel about that.
Yeah, I don't know if someone wants to add something.
Well, I would like to add to Santiago that Latin America has a very young population, actually. We moved to Monterrey, we started here, but nobody's using our website anymore here. So we moved to Monterrey, we are Mexicans, Pin Studies, we are 4 Mexicans that started here in San Francisco, the website, and it started pretty well. But 3 of my partners went back to Mexico, to Monterrey, and we decided to plant a seed in one of the most important universities in Latin America, which is the Tec of Monterrey. And it's been pretty well for us. Right now we are close to 2,000 users in 2 months, so we are doing pretty well. And the thing is, we are starting to look for investment now because we are receiving a lot of requests from our users there. It's a very different environment than here, and there's a lot of people from all over Latin America that goes to Monterrey to study, and you can see that a lot of students are looking for places to buy and sell things.
Okay, so I think it would be very insightful for you both that started there. Which were your biggest challenges for getting there into the market? Like, which are the main differences that you saw from starting a business here and
Hi, my name is Emilio. I'm one of the co-founders for Gondolus. It's a social discovery and messaging application. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, is that the smartphone penetration is very low, okay? It's nothing compared to the US. But one of the big advantages is that when it comes to creating partnerships or having word of mouth, people are a lot more open to try new things as well, okay?
Thank you very much. And now, Fred, now that you have a lot of experience about the difference in the market, what can you tell us about the difference in the regulations or the actual implementation of business from the US to get it to Latin America?
Yeah, so let me just qualify my perspective, just to give a little bit of the, is it my mic? Okay, just to qualify a little bit based on the experience. I noticed there were a lot of Brazilians when I was walking into the room. Just out of curiosity, could the Brazilians put their hands up? I'm just curious. Okay, great. So my perspective is I'm from Brazil originally. I came to the US for college and I've been living here for the last 20 years. And 2 years ago, I started a company. It really is headquartered in the US, but all of the operations is in Sao Paulo and in Mexico City to operate within Brazil and Mexico. So it's a really interesting experience for me because I was able to, experience 20 years of doing business in the US and then all of a sudden go back to the country I was from to actually see how business is done there. So you're asking specifically about, laws and regulations and things of the sort. I would say, we talk a lot at the high level as to what are the challenges and, things that one should think about before going there. There's a lot of brass tactic things that one should think about as you're thinking about business. Because, just to give you a couple examples, if you want to set up a subsidiary in Brazil, whereas in the US you can set up a company within 24 hours in Delaware, it took us 4 months to actually get a company started in Brazil using the existing process. We wanted to set up a bank account in Sao Paulo, and because this was a company that had headquarters in the US, there was a lot of documentation we had to show. That actually took a full 3 months. So there's actually a lot of brass tactics that one needs to think about before you actually go there. Somebody was asking the question in the previous panel about how do we just go global immediately? I mean, there's little things like that one doesn't think about. Clearly our business plan did not have a 4-month delay to open a bank account when we first started, but it's some of the realities. In terms of regulations, the other thing is the first thing you need to do before you start a business, and I think it's more true in Brazil than in Mexico now that I've experienced both countries, get a very good lawyer and a very good accountant when you go. Because Brazil has a lot of complexity in its regulations and its legal system. And it's really interesting because the background is a lot of the laws were created to prevent bad behavior that was occurring in the past. So every time a new law is introduced and somebody finds a way to bend the system, A new law is introduced to prevent that from happening. So when you're actually coming to the market and you're looking at all the different possibilities to figure out what it is that you can do and what it is that you can't do, it's not immediately obvious. There's a huge gray zone, and you have to kind of figure this out, and you can't figure it out on your own. You need a really good lawyer and a really good accountant to help you figure it out. But if you do, that's competitive advantage right there, because a lot of businesses in Brazil, they get started and people do things in a particular way, but legislation keeps changing all the time. So understanding the legal system and the accounting system ends up being a strong competitive advantage to the things that you do. Does that address the regulations?
Yeah, please.
Give a tip. You want to go to Mexico and you're afraid of all these regulations and you think that it's a high risk to establish a company there. There's something called shelter companies that are already set it up. So anyone who wants to go, you can just contact these shelter companies and they will run your operations there, your business, and you're paying just a fee. You're not actually in the country, but you're paying them to run your company while you establish a more permanent operation in the country. So,
I mean, just to quantify a little bit, it might not take months, it might take a couple of weeks, but it is a little bit better. One thing that I would advise to anyone trying to understand all these legal stuff and making sure that your subsidiary is as fast as possible incorporated and as cheap as possible and you have the right lawyers and etc. I would recommend everyone to go to whoever is doing acceleration or funding, because we end up trying to understand how to very quickly incorporate companies. So right now, the 21 investments that we've done in Mexico, we have incorporated Delaware corporations and then subsidiaries in Mexico. So we've been getting better and better at making them really fast. And I'm sure that every country has entities like us who are trying to understand what's the cheapest and fastest way to incorporate correctly a company. And we're usually very happy to share how we did it and who helped us either have the legal documents or understand some of the tax implications.
So there one more question regarding the funding. How is it for the international team to go and ask funding in Mexico and get a local team? Which would be your best recommendation for that?
I mean, in that sense, I think that there are two very different questions, because the sort of funding that an international team is looking when going to a new country should probably be an expansion capital, not the first money in, and that's really hard because of how the ecosystem is right now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But on the generating the team, I think that the whole Latin America, as well as any other emerging market, has great people. So one of the requests that we get from emails or people who travel to Mexico or we meet at an event is, hey, can you help me get the best developers in Mexico to work with me? And the answer is always no. There's great people in every emerging market, but the best people are always busy. They are already working on something interesting. So as in any other place, including the Silicon Valley, going and finding the best people is going to require you to get connected with the ecosystem and have a really good offering. They do, like the average very talented developer in Mexico does earn way less than the average developer here. So if you have a competitive salary, then you'll probably be well off, but you still have to convince them that you are a great team and that your product is worth their time and everything. So if you want the best people, you're going to have to do the hard work of human resources, of course. On the funding side, right now the ecosystem in Mexico, and the reason we started doing originally Mexican VC and then we joined 500 is because access to capital was really hard for even the top entrepreneurs in Mexico 2.5 years ago. The reason of that is because the big international funds didn't really invest in Mexico at all. And the big angel investor groups were really just a title for people to say that they were investing, even though they weren't. So we decided to naively start a fund. It was a very fun experience. We invested in 7 startups. But since that moment, a lot of things had happened right now. We have Wayra, which is a part of a Telefonica initiative that has presence in many countries. They are also investing in Mexico. They've been investing in like 20 early stage startups. We have done 21 investments, but you also have some other angel groups and some other funds like venture partners and Angel Venture Mexico, Guadalajara Angel Investor Network, and suddenly you have like a great community of people who are doing the first checks. But suddenly it's really hard to get the next tier of investments. It could be a seed round or a Series A. It's really hard. So right now we're still having challenges on getting to that point where you have the whole investment pipeline ready. So for an international team that it's the first time in Mexico and they don't know the market, it's probably going to be really hard to get any kind of capital. What you probably want to do is to raise money here or somewhere else and then go and acquire a team that is already rocking in an emerging market.
Okay, thank you. And you then?
I can also add the Brazil perspective. Yeah, I mean, Brazil is also pretty challenging from an early stage investing. Most of the capital that's available for investment has really been deployed on the later stages in private equity and public equities, and the market is beginning to get a little bit better now. I have to say the Endeavor organization does a really good job in Brazil actually trying to provide intelligence to small companies and trying to bring advisors together. But if we're talking about people who are going to Latin America from here, I completely agree that you're better off trying to get funding here because people are more open-minded and it's just easier to get that done. In my personal experience, I wanted to establish a company that was basically creating a bridge between the US and Latin America. So right off the bat, I looked for investors in Brazil and in the US, and I did the round at the same time. And the reason I mention this is because it's always tough for you to have a round in the US where you have the existing investor base, and then you go to a new country and then you try to find a new person to add to the existing board. It's hard enough to try to get a syndicate together or an investor in Latin America, let alone somebody that's going to be investing in a structure from another country that they don't quite understand as well. So my recommendation is if you're thinking of actually doing something that you know will involve a certain country, try to go early to find a partner, because I have to say the most valuable thing of actually finding Brazilian investors wasn't even the capital that was needed, it was really the expertise. Because again, I was coming from the US with operating experience in the US. My business would have shut down 3 times already if it wasn't for the help that I got from the individuals that invested, definitely. So my advice is even more important than the capital is the expertise that you get. Now that expertise can come from individuals that may have a lot of experience in the area that you're working on, or it could be from a local company that has expertise and could be a value-add partner to you. You have to be creative because there isn't the angel network and availability of capital that you have here in the US.
Okay, thank you. Are there any industries that you would recommend getting, or that are the trend for Latin America right now? For entrepreneurs going there?
I mean, what we're seeing is a lot of e-commerce, payment methods, educational related stuff, and I would say that we're investing in almost any different vertical that uses internet somehow, but those are the 3 that I think are right now really, really hot.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, again, I spent several years here in the US investing in technology, right? I mean, most VC in the US, not most, but at least kind of a lot of the funds that I've been affiliated with in deals have been around developing proprietary technology, whether that's in software or hardware or life sciences. I noticed that in Latin America, the opportunities really are in services to begin with, and usually it's taking something that didn't work as well, hasn't been working as well, and making it a lot more efficient. That seems to be the low-hanging fruit. Really services, classic examples of companies that did really well in Brazil is you had the Brazilian post office, and that was incredibly inefficient. And there were another 6 companies that kind of popped up to actually make the process way more efficient, and they did really well. E-commerce also doing really well, again, trying to bring better products and services to people. In healthcare, we see this a lot. There's been a massive increase in the number of people that transition from the lowest social classes to the middle class. And whenever you have this massive transition, you also have more disposable income for people to try to get better services and better quality of life. Now, whether that is products, whether that's services, whether that's healthcare, there's just a massive opportunity. It's one of the reasons why Brazil has been so notorious for the last few years, is because virtually every sector has been growing really fast because of this dramatic increase in available disposable income for better products and services.
Okay, thank you. And if you could recommend a certain time for going to Brazil, you would say now.
It's one of those things. Like, 3 years ago, the cover of The Economist was, it's Brazil's turn, and you had the Christ figure flying off of the mountain. And then, they don't talk about Brazil like that anymore, but now it's like the Mexican sombreros that are like flying. I feel like you go through these volatility periods where, The Economist has their favorite Latin American country every year, but the truth is, all of these countries are going, up and to the left, so whenever you go, it's going to be a good idea. There will probably be some volatility here and there, but the macro trends really are pointing in the right direction. So I think any time will be a good time for at least the foreseeable future.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone that wants to add something on that?
I mean, it is a moment where Mexico is being selected for that specific spot. But I think that any time is good if you want to really dive in and understand the market and understand the needs that your customers in the industry, whatever needs you're trying to solve, actually have. And I think that's one of the key things that is happening right now in Latin America. And I mean, building a little bit on that point, entrepreneurs right now in Latin America, where we're starting all these companies, very quickly find something that the customer needs. So mentioning on the last panel that they mentioned that you have to go and the best money is coming from the customers. That is totally what's happening in Latin America. Most teams are revenue oriented and they are trying to find money from the customers very quickly. So that builds companies that are actually, they make sense in the business-wise from day one. So whenever you want to do something like that and find a new need in the market that no one else is solving, like the postal service in Brazil or anything else like that, you will have a great experience in Latin America. If you have a first world problem that it doesn't have a business model and something like that, it's going to be really hard.
Okay, thank you. And you that are the person or the contact point for taking those decisions, those investment decisions, which are the 3 things that you focus on when you receive a new entrepreneurial team, or what are your...
Yeah, I mean, when we take teams for the accelerator, it's a little bit different than when we invest directly from the seed fund, which are 2 different investments. When we're looking at teams for the accelerator, we're looking at teams that have all the components to build both the product and the go-to-market strategy and execute it. So we're looking at maybe 2 or 3 people who have the developers skills to iterate quickly on the product, and maybe 1 person who has a great business experience in that market. They need to show us that they are able to do all of that either with previous experience or an MVP at that moment. And that's pretty much what we look at into the team. Of course, the idea has to be interesting. Of course, the market has to be big enough, but mostly it's about having those components on the team. When we're looking at an investment from the seed fund directly without going through the accelerator, we look a little bit more onto the market and the traction that what they've learned from the market. So we are a lot about data design and distribution. So when we're analyzing an investment, either on the seed fund or a follow-on investment, we're going to want to see some metrics of how what they are doing is actually working, and that doesn't mean vanity metrics. That means actual business metrics about the key components of the business.
And yeah, thank you. Okay. Can you share your experience? You both, I think, is very insightful for all the people. Which were the things that you did right at the beginning, or that you should change or recommend when going to Mexico? What should you change from your experience?
Well, we've been in Mexico just for 3 months now, so we are growing. I think we made a lot of mistakes at the beginning, creating the group, creating the company, the idea, but it's like everything. I mean, you just identify your mistakes, you fix them, and you go on. I mean, we're still learning about the market we are targeting, and there's always something that you would like to change. And in the past, of course, that we've done different, but we're still growing, and we're too young to have big mistakes.
So could it be resumed seeing the market and doing the appropriate changes rapidly?
Well, for us, going to Mexico, I think it was a great idea because they have a need for a free marketplace. There were no options in Monterrey to sell your products online for free, especially for students that they don't have a lot of money. And we try to keep it that way. So we have a business plan now to get some earnings, but we need to get users. So we are in that stage right now, getting users, and then go to the big companies and promote our business idea.
Okay, thank you. Emilio, do you have any recommendation?
For us, I guess one of the most important things is getting traction, having people like your product, and what we decided is that since the market for the smartphone still remains in Mexico and Latin America very small, we actually create a partnership with a company that has all the connections for the non-smartphone market, and that's kind of our strategy. We're going to go for the loose market, so by the time they convert into a smartphone, we'll have them. And we should have probably done that earlier, but we didn't.
Yeah. Can you please explain us a little bit your business model?
Our business model, yes. Well, what we're trying to do is that what our application does, it allows people to connect and meet new people based on events or types of games like speed dating, things like that. And then we have a messaging part for people and friends to keep in contact with each other. But what we're trying to do is that our strategy is to go for the loose market, which remains almost 83% of the market in Latin America, something like that, and the feature phone market, by developing through premium SMS campaigns, some like a mini web that they can navigate from their feature phone and be part of the product. And then eventually, once they convert into a smartphone, they'll have the possibility of using our application.
I want to add that Latin America is hungry for new things. You are here in the United States and you can see a lot of applications. You go to the App Store and you look for something to solve your need, and you can find like 50 options. But in Latin America, people is expecting more apps from their citizens, from Mexico, from people that speaks their same language. And so I think and it's a growing market. The average age is 27 years. Here in America is 37. So people is very young, and they will eventually look for something new or create something new. So there are a lot of opportunities there.
I don't want to be disruptive, but I think I have different opinions than that. Because right now Mexico has 50 million users connected to the internet, and 1 out of 4 of those use Netflix. So, I mean, that is a big enough market for you to connect people through smartphones or other sort of televisions. The average person who uses the internet in Mexico right now has 4 devices to connect to the internet. So even though the penetration rate might not be 100% of the population, the number might even be small. The people who are connected to the internet are actually interacting, are using Facebook, are using Netflix. And yes, they do like to see things in their language, but honestly, the most used applications are in English. And I mean, Facebook doesn't really have a Spanish client on mobile yet. So ultimately, I think that you don't need to change that much if you want to go to Latin America. It only depends on really what is your business. So for example, if you are doing transactions, well, you better be prepared to change your checkout process to have local payments, because at least half of the transactions that are happening are going through local payments, either convenience stores or bank deposits. If you're using anything that has an interface directly to the consumer, you will have to have a very good interface, a very good usability, because one of the things that happens is that most of the things that have a lot of penetration in the market are already very polished. Like Facebook, when all the social stuff, we didn't see the Twitter when it looked like a horrible interface. We see the new Twitter. Like everything that has penetrated Latin America has already gotten there where it was really good. So you need to go with a very good interface. But the good news is that the design style and the usability is the same as here. So it's not as other regions of the world where the paradigms are totally different.
Thank you. Anyone that wants to add to that?
I mean, my advice would just be general in terms of like things that one should do differently or what to think about. I really think it's about having local people that can really help you. At the end of the day, you just don't want to take, your business probably has already enough risk in terms of the business model that you don't want to take a risk on the execution of it, and the best way to try to minimize that is really to try to have local people on the ground, who are either your investors or they're your partners or they're your employees. Just make sure you have people that know what they're doing, because that will save you a lot of hassle. Again, speaking for myself, it was really the fact that I had people to go to when I was on the ground to actually ask questions and say, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Do you think this is reasonable? And there's a lot of ideas that I had that were really crummy, and after talking to them, they gave me a really good rationale for why they were. And that saved us so much time. So really, I think my advice is really about people and making sure you don't take execution risk more than you have to.
Great. And in terms of the trends for entrepreneurs, because we have a different, or we had for the last years a different mindset from the US to Latin America, but I think all of that is changing, and it's merely because of funds like you guys that are incentivizing this to happen. So how do you see this mindset changing or entrepreneurial trends going forward?
Well, I mean, the teams that we see in almost any emerging market are very similar to the teams that we see here. They have, they are eager to change market. They are developing a product very quickly and trying to iterate very quickly. The things that are different is that in every place where access to capital has been really, really challenging on the early stage, we see entrepreneurs that are extremely scrappy, that can make money last forever, and I've heard a little bit of that on the past panel too. But I mean, honestly, the teams that we see are constantly building a lot of things and achieving, like maybe even traction with $20,000–$25,000. So those are teams that there's many factors that make entrepreneurs in at least in Mexico, and I see this in Colombia and other places too. They usually live with their parents, so they don't pay rent. They can eat for free at home. So most of the money that they raise, it goes directly into marketing or something like that. So, or any kind of distribution. So you see very, very capital efficient teams, at least on the very early stage.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think all the other Brazilians in the room would agree that I find that Brazilian entrepreneurs have a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. That's actually really strong. And I agree that one of the advantages of scarcity of capital is that you end up becoming more capital efficient. But I do find that there's certain rules of how things are played in the US. Again, I've worn the hat of being an entrepreneur, I've worn the hat of being a venture capitalist. There's a certain trust that goes with finding other people for you to work with. And I find that this is one place where perhaps Brazilian entrepreneurs are still a little bit behind compared to the US. There's still a lot of mistrust, which is, if I go to somebody else and I share everything that I'm doing, are they going to stab me in the back, or will they try to steal my idea? Whereas, a lot of times that will hamper, where you can go, because a lot of times you can't figure everything out on your own. I find this is actually really interesting, but in Brazil, there's like hundreds of biotech companies. Biotech companies in Brazil is one university professor with his one idea inside one company that he set up outside of the university. Now, none of these companies go anywhere, because they only have the one university professor, and they never hire anybody because, well, can I really trust this other person? They never bring their ideas together and develop a bigger portfolio. So I would say that's the place where there's a lot of opportunity. It's just people that are willing to say, look, I have a kind of half-baked idea. This person also has a half-baked idea. Yes, that person can compete with me, but maybe if we become friends and we trust each other, we can go a lot further.
Thank you.
One place where I see that Brazilian entrepreneurs and Argentinian entrepreneurs are doing really well, but the rest of Latin America, including Mexico, to get better is sophistication when talking about terms for an investment, and generally how to structure the rounds and stuff like that.
Yeah, and again, I think to your point, that a lot of this has to do with, for example, a lot of times when venture capitalists invest or when you take a round, there's a lot of issues around control. It's very hard for you as an entrepreneur to always have control. The minute you look for funding, investors will inevitably have something of power over you. And unless you find that that person is somebody that you trust and you think that it'll, all in all, it'll be a more positive experience than not, it'll be really hard to go forward. I mean, I started my company, I raised funding, I'm CEO, but literally my board could fire me at any minute. And I'm comfortable with that, I mean, I just have to trust that if I do a good job and I keep doing a good job, they will want to keep me there and I'll keep having that role. If I don't, they can fire me. But if instead I decided to just bootstrap and do everything on my own and get money from friends and family and always keep pushing it further, my potential would be a lot less. So again, back to your point, there's a lack of sophistication around understanding. If a VC or a later stage investor comes to you and says, I'm going to buy 51% of your company, I'm going to control it, people just take a step back and they say, whoa, this is too much, I don't know that I can go forward with that. But there's a lot of norms that in the US people are more comfortable with that I think on average lead everybody, make all boats rise on average.
Thank you. Can you share with us, please?
About software development, there are very good software houses in Mexico, and you should look for, or in Latin America actually. When we first quote our website here, it was twice the cost that it cost us building in Mexico. So you should look at that, and you can save some bucks going south and developing your website or your software in Latin America. Now with the applications that are there, you can track the progress real time, and it's not a big deal. So that's a tip, yes, for you guys.
Okay, thank you. So I think now we've all heard. Okay, now we've all heard the opportunities that have arisen in the last years for Latin America. So I suggest all of you that are thinking in starting any business to consider this new market, which has really positive growth trends going forward, which has very solid economical indicators. So we have only 5 minutes left, so each one of you can give me their main recommendation for all of these people that are interested in going, which would be?
So my main recommendation is the Latin American market. It's a virgin market. There's a big cake down there, a big opportunity for everyone. Also, I'm coming from the smartphone world, and I know there's a lot of users already in Mexico. Let's talk about Mexico right now. But there's a lot of users. I mean, there's more people that are not still in the smartphone telephone. So we need to think about that transition, how we want to take these people to the smartphone. So there's a great opportunity for any application, any idea, and people are hungry for that. Supporting a little bit of the idea that Roberto said, I think people also need, if you have a company right here in the US, or you want to jump to the Mexico market, you need to find people who know the market in Mexico, because marketing works different there.
So I guess one advice would be just building on your point that there's a big cake down there. I really do believe that there's a ton of opportunity, and if there's one lesson that I learned as an entrepreneur is I had a business plan when I first started, and I thought, okay, this is my understanding of the space, and this is how I'm going to go and try to conquer this space. And then I went into the market, and it's just incredible how much I learned in a very short amount of time that I was there. Opportunities that I didn't even contemplate when I was first writing the business plan, but now that you're in it and you're studying it, you get a much better feel for what it is. So the message is, don't be afraid. If you're excited and there's a particular area that you're very passionate about and you're very excited to go and do something in that space, take the leap, go in there, understand the market, try to understand all the details, because there's a lot that you think you know or you don't know that you don't know, but it's not until you go there that you will actually figure it out. I mean, it's pretty notorious within the venture world that when companies do well, they don't do well because they follow the business plan to a T. Oftentimes, the original business plan just fails completely. But what happens is you have scrappy entrepreneurs that are looking for opportunities, and when they find something that's a little bit better, they change courses, they're not afraid to do that, and then eventually they come up with a great opportunity. So if you're dying to be an entrepreneur, just take the leap and spend some time studying that market, because chances are you'll learn a lot more than you think you do right now just from evaluating it from the distance.
For me, it would be that we are in a point in time where execution of technology startups is cheaper. There is less geographical dependency on where your team is located, and ultimately, one thing that we see in our whole portfolio is that the founders who have been able to have an international vision and understand that they are part of a bigger market, that there is a lot to learn from people who have tried in other markets or other emerging markets, have been the ones that have succeeded. So I think there is a big cake in Latin America. There's a lot of people who have a lot of passion on how to solve different problems. So if you have any market or any startup that is, or business idea where you can learn from any other place in the world, go and talk with people and execute very quickly.
I will add about the using resources from Latin America. It's a growing market. It's young people that is passionate about working hard. They are very hard workers. And I will tell you that you should look south.
For me, I have to say that like every market is different. So if somebody's business model is to go global, Latin America is an emerging market, therefore represents a huge opportunity. And we do run a pilot, a small pilot, and even in a small city, because you'll be surprised of how many things are different and how many things you can come up with different too. Okay?
Well, I really, really appreciate. I think we've heard great things today, and we'll have now 10 minutes for,
I wanted to add something else. As far as the behavior, something else, it's just Brazil. It does represent. It's like to me, to our company. I feel like it's kind of a part of Latin America in a way, because the language and certain barriers. So if you're thinking of Latin America, running a pilot in Mexico should give you an idea more over other countries in Latin America like Colombia, Chile, etc. But Brazil, from my point of view, the behavior and the language barrier can make a little difference, okay, compared to the rest of our Latin American countries.
Okay, so
That's fabulous. So thank you so much to our panelists. If you have questions for them, we have a 15-minute break. We'll be back here at 3:35. Bar is open and food is on the table. So please help yourselves.
Thank you.